spread across the groups of activities and the themes of the council group. Obviously, that level of investment does require funding. What confident is that it's still a prudent arrangement as far as the debt and interest payments on the debt that we had to raise to fund those works. What's always useful to point out, though, is although it was $1.4 billion of capital investment, it was only a net debt increase of $500 million. So obviously, although we plan on raising debt to fund our capital works, we will not go out and actually physically raise it unless our balance sheet requires that cash on hand. So what we do is we utilise cash reserves, we utilise operational surpluses first, wherever possible. And as usual, as we mentioned before, is we've managed to maintain that some of the strongest credit ratings in the country, AA from Standard & Poor's and AA2 for Moody's. A couple of pages of graphs just to bring this into the ultimate tests that we have. This first one here, you see the three graphs. These are our internal Treasury policy parameters, what we've set. So the black bars over a 3-year period are showing you what the parameters are that we've set internally as being what we believe are prudent measures. The green in all cases, and they are all green, are showing that we are below those trigger points, those parameter levels. So we're operating well and truly within those prudent financial parameters. The other one, though, because it is calculated slightly differently, is externally, and you'll have seen some media on this one, the credit rating agencies do calculate some of these ratios in a slightly different way. So again, over a 3-year period, what you see here is our direct debt against our adjusted operating revenue. The black 270% trigger point is what's deemed to be something that the agencies would then look at and say, let's reassess, let's have another look at council. Is it still operating prudently? As you can see in those 3 bars below, still green, still operating within those financial parameters. So confident debt serviceability, the debt affordability are still well within our ratios there. The other issue that often comes up this time of year, and it's come up in the discussions already today, and it does warrant just a wee bit of time just to look at the numbers because there has been a few misunderstandings or misinformation coming through in the media to date. What we have here is 2 little boxes which just show dollar spends in the first one, so our total staff costs across the entire group, as well as our full-time equivalents. Now, just to explain, headcount is often used as a measure, but a headcount ignores the fact of how much time that person is actually putting into delivering services for council. And in our headcount, we will have people, for instance, that may be doing 4 hours of classes at a leisure centre. So, although they might be included in our headcount, what we find is it's more relevant and it's more valid throughout the sector and the country as a whole, actually, is to use a full-time equivalent basis, because that's actually the level of resourcing being provided. So what you'll see in front of you there in those 2 boxes, the first one is how many millions of dollars are spent on staff costs and the movement between the 2 years. So last year, how much was spent versus the year just completed, 15-16. So the total bill across the entire group has gone up from $792 to $803 million. It's an $11 million increase. Interestingly, for the council parent, we've spent less the last year, 2015-16, than we did in the prior year, $5 million less. Across the CCOs, there's been a bit of an increase, $16 million. To give a feel of scale, though, we're talking about an $11 million increase year on year. Cost of living increase, if you take that as a 1% increase, which is not unrealistic these days, that's $8 million alone, just the cost of living increase. So basically the dollar increase year on year is a little bit more than cost of living. As far as number of staff go, which is the second box there, you'll see at the group level, the number of FTEs has gone up by 192 full-time equivalents. 178 of those were in the CCOs, and within the council parent there were 14. What that does show us quite clearly, and the number, some of the little bullet points down below articulate it, is that this is fundamentally in the areas of delivery. The FTE increases are occurring where services are being delivered. Some examples given there, you'll see are increased services, so the hop card, as well as the merging of the gold card with the hop card, as well as just literally the magnitude of those people using the hop card, 90% of all passenger transport users. Zoo staffing, a bit of health and safety aspect, as well as just literally service levels increasing. The new Panuku has got a development mandate which has extended the precincts out to Onehunga, Manukau. Significant projects, the World Masters Games, AT have increased their staff by 16. The CRL, 27 staff are in there now, geared up, ready to implement and deliver on that project. Auckland Conventions with an RFA, we've got 5 staff there who are revenue generating. That's the notion of the nature of what their work is. There's also, as we had last year in a couple of cases, there's also been some additional in-housing of what was previously an outsourced area of work. Water care maintenance, that's the Norwestern treatment plants. They've actually brought the teams in-house. And also Transport have determined that with all the technology requirements based on their services, online monitoring and all other aspects, it was better to actually bring 13 staff in-house as opposed to using external resources there. And look, the one which has already been raised this morning, as well as the very last one there, the growth is driving the council increase. So as we mentioned above, there were an FTE increase of 14 within council. That was including reductions in back office because we had 55 increase building consent, resource consent and licence compliance alone to cope with the growth in that area, that 13%. And as one of you have already pointed out, the very last point there, if we do jump back to close on 6 years ago in the pre-amalgamation, the legacy council headcount on a like-for-like basis, despite 11 or 12% increase in population, we still have less FTEs than the 8 legacy councils had 6 years ago. So, in summary, look, strong group financial performance, $250 million operating surplus, higher than we budgeted and expected, which is good. Delivered an extensive investment in the city. $1.4 billion is a large program of work spread across geographically as well as various activities. Operational expenditure well controlled. So if you look at the spend area, it is literally within 0.3% of budget for the operational expenditure. And the debt parameters are well within, still operating within all of our prudent limits. In fact, the gross debt was, or net debt I should say, was $40 million below forecast. And look, the final line there is the one that really came out as part of our stock exchange release, which is, yes, significant investment, but a solid financial performance behind that. So that's a very quick summary of what is a very large, diverse organisation. Happy for myself or Francis and Christine to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and isn't it a shame that when we're on the campaign trail, nobody believes it? Because they're all told something quite different from the media. Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not going to relitigate what I said before, so I'll leave it at that. But what I will say, good report, Kevin, and you're right, Penny. But secondly, I just want to capture TV last night, re the Civic, the old Civic building. I thought it was actually going to come back to us for further, for an update. I might have missed something. It might have been a doze or something. But whilst it's good news story, I would have thought we would have had a more update before media release it to Auckland.
Councillor Penrose, you could probably bring that up in the next. This is the annual report.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Saying it's all good news stories. It's all good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to have the pleasure of moving it.
Moving it. Thank you. If I got a second for that. Second, Councillor Cashmore.
Yep, Cashmore,
I've got a question too.
Question, Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kevin or Francis, at Audit and Risk, the Auditor General had some fairly glowing comments about Council's delivery, about what's been achieved. I can't recall them verbatim, but they were saying sort of leading the charge in the commentary, which is pretty great to hear. So a couple of questions. One is the trading profit or surplus of $250 million, probably some commentary around how that gets rolled into CapEx and how that actually happens. And the other commentary is the delivery of our capital budget. We're up in, I understand, the 80% now to budget.
77%. Yep.
Yes, nearly 80%, okay, as compared to a national average closer to 65 or something, isn't it? So what further upside do we have potentially to getting that right up? I know our aim's 100, so what steps need to be taken to lift that further? Is it an accuracy in the budgeting detail or is it a performance issue?
I'll deal with the 250.
Yep.
The 250, what happens is that when that has some non-financial, non-cash items included in it, but we strip that out. If you go to the cash flow statement, you'll see that there's a thing called operating expense, surplus there. That's the excess cash that we get. We use that, as Kevin said earlier, to fund capital expenditure before we borrow, and that's why we're able to spend 1.4 billion but only borrow 500 million. So that allows us to do that. So we're always using cash wherever we can. And that, I think, is important, because while we effectively borrow for all new capital, that's the way we set our funding, because we fund all OPEX through rates. We're actually, because we have some cash generation that allows us to, just the way the accounting system works, we do have that surplus cash, and we will always use that first. So hopefully that clarifies your question.
That'll need some emphasis, Kevin, thank you. And the other one about capital delivery?
Yes, through the chair. Look, whether it will ever reach 100% truly is always going to be a bit of a stretch. This year in particular, we did have if you remember, there was a discussion with Watercare where they did a bit of a reset process. They actually drew back and actually reassessed their program of works to identify they're actually delivering them as efficiently as possible. So they actually slowed down some of the works in the Watercare area. There was also some area around some of the Panuku development precinct work where there was another bit of a reset and it determined exactly what work should occur. So some of the spend that didn't occur was actually in those two areas. Some of the work that has been done, if you remember, Dean Kimpton talked about the notion of, in the operations area, especially park, sports, recreation, of actually having a more of a 3-year focus on the program. And so if a particular project can't proceed for some reason, there's already been an understanding as to what the next priority should be, and so the funds can be diverted through to the next program. So the operations area under Dean Kimpton is doing significant work in that area just to try and bring that completion rate higher.
Right.
Councillor Wood.
I just want to make a comment, really, just in relation to indicators of growth, public transport, patronage, 82.9 million trips. And what I really want to say there is that the Auckland plan has an indicator that we would have 140 million trips by 2022. And that was, taking into consideration that the Central Rail link wouldn't be in place until 2021. So it was all going to happen without the Central Rail link in place. So I just wonder, with the expenditure that we're putting into public transport at the moment, I just want to make the point, and it's the last time I'll probably be able to make this point, but it's an important point, that is important, that I don't believe we are getting the bang for our bucks that we really should be achieving. And I can, I talk and I go on about ferries, but, that is a catastrophe that the ferry fares aren't integrated into the passenger transport operating model. And, I've banged on about that, but no one seems to want to really listen. We've spent $1,200 million on electrifying the rail system and buying the new EMUs, and then we cut the number down by 30, should have been 87, and then we got 57. And now we hear that on the peak hour trains, there isn't room on those for the patronage that we're seeking. So, councillors, I just really, this last meeting that I attending of this committee, and we hear these figures, I think that we're shortchanging ourselves if we think that we're really making the progress that we were looking for. I understood that Auckland Transport said, oh look, the 140 million, we're not going to achieve that. It'll be about 105 million. Well, if that's the case, I'd hate to see the Auckland plan, when it's revised in the next couple of years, actually bring the figure back, because if you go overseas to comparable cities the size of Auckland, they've got hundreds of millions of people using public transport. And here we are saying that 82.9 million, we're making good progress. Well, I don't think we are. And the area that I'm talking about is interchanges, ferries, getting people out of their private vehicles. Councillor Penrose is always talking about the Southern Motorway. Well, I think we've seen major improvements on the North Shore with the Northern Busway and the better public transport that we've provided over there. But South Auckland has been very glacial in relation to the improvements that we're seeking. So, Auckland ratepayers are putting in a lot of money out of their own back pockets into public transport, and I just want to make that point that I don't think that figure is what we should be seeing, is one that really is showing that we've been achieving the outcomes that we're looking for. Thank you.